Hi everyone, welcome back to GB-01 test series video. This video will focus on how to adjust the trigger to have a short travel and also short reset while maintaining the operation of the pistol. Okay, so before we start, I would like to give you a warning. For today, the procedure, what I'm going to show you today, it should be the last step of your modification of this pistol. And also, what I'm going to show you, the modification, it will be permanent. So if you happen to, for example, set it a little bit too more, then there will be no turning back. Okay, so I would suggest, if you are skillful enough or you are confident, you don't have to buy any spare part, but I would suggest to buy at least one set of spare part. That will be including the trigger bar and also the sear. So that would be the two spare part. Okay, so for this pistol, you can see it's partially disassembled because I have the left panel out. And I have installed the stock trigger bar and also the stock sear. That will be without any modification. So just same as what you get when you purchase the pistol, when you open the box, and that would be the part installed in the pistol. Okay, but I have done something as well. If you look at the trigger screw, I actually keep turning the trigger screw all the way in, just maybe a little bit remain. So this trigger screw actually stopped the trigger from moving rearward a lot. So you no longer to have the full trigger travel. Because if you remove that, or if you have the gun, we call it the stock gun or the gun that you just purchased from us, the screw should not be like that. It should be somewhere around here. So you will have the full trigger travel. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to screw it in to restrict the trigger movement, so I will have a short trigger travel. Okay, so that's what I did. I have everything stored in there, that's what I did. And see if the pistol is going to be functional. Alright, so cock it. Okay, set it off. Still, yeah, sort of like working. You can release. But how about the reset? Okay, do it again. Alright, so apparently the first shot is going to fire because you can see that I pull the trigger, let it go, whack the side and then pull the trigger, it works. But when I pull the trigger, pull it to rework, and then slowly release the trigger, and then try to push it again, it doesn't work. Okay, so that would be the problem when we have everything stock without any modification, and then we adjust the trigger screw to just restrict the travel distance just enough to just let the hammer to be full. But when we are going to hold the trigger and pull it rework, the gun is no longer able to reset. So refer to my previous video if you remember. For the trigger to reset, the trigger bar have to move up on the sear. So it go below the sear, move up, and then in content the sear, something like that. So actually what's going on, why we adjust that and then we don't have the reset going, then the gun is no longer going to be operational. Sometime, I cannot replicate here, but that would be two situations. This is the first situation, cannot reset. The second situation will be the hammer cannot be locked. Okay, in order to understand what's going on, we need to have the whole fire control and the slide, everything assembled, and then we have to figure out what's going on. And fortunately, we can actually take out the left panel, and then you can see there's an exposed gap over here. We can actually look under to see what's going on. Okay, This is what's happening. But what's going on is that the trigger bar is stuck halfway on the sear and it cannot return. Okay, how about if I'm going to push the trigger bar? Alright, so okay, I'm doing my hand. It's so stiff. So I try to use the Allen key to push the trigger bar up, but it's so stiff. I'm going to use my finger. Alright, so it already reset. So let's look at that again. So I'm trying to hold the trigger, pull the slide, and then let's see how the sear and the trigger bar are going to interact. Okay, already holding the trigger. Release and let go of my trigger. See, so you can see the trigger bar move, but it's not able to move up, and then you will need an external force, which means my finger, push it up to push it back up. Okay, so but if I go into not holding the trigger, okay, I didn't hold my trigger. I just put a slide, and we have the same problem. So, but in the meantime, already I inverted the gun. So I invert the whole gun, so the gravity will also play a major factor in affecting the trigger mechanism. Okay, but I just want to show you, what happened over there. Okay, when we understand the problem, we can actually adjust or actually modify the part in order to allow a proper reset, allow the trigger to go back up. Okay, so first of all, assume we have our trigger bar, and then we are going to look from the left-hand side to the right, just like what we have seen through the panel spacing over here. So actually, we are looking from the trigger will be over here. We're looking from the left to the right, and this is the trigger bar interaction area. So you can see it's a sort of a rectangle, right? So this part. And then the sear. I don't have any more spare sear, so the one that I'm going to show you will be actually modified. So that will be the sear. The sear actually will be like that. So we are actually focused on this curvature or on this part of the sear. Okay. Okay, so I copy and paste and draw two parts together. Okay, so let's start from the left to the right. So before we cock the hammer, we move the slide. TB stands for trigger bar, going to move below the sear. So just like that. And then when we are going to slowly release the trigger, so the trigger bar, we're going to move from here and go up, right? You go up. But it just stuck halfway like that. So that's what I saw in my gun, but sometimes you may have it over here. Alright? So it's stuck. So when it's stuck, you're no longer going to return to a proper reset position, the original position, which will be the ideal case, will be over here, will be a little bit lower, but I just, this is only a representation. And then we will have a full reset. So before, we would like it to move all the way to the right-hand side, but actually what's happening will be at the center, it got stuck. So what can we do? Okay, so the root cause of this problem is actually the trigger bar is a bit too long. So I'm talking about the width. So it's a bit too long. So that's why when you push weir, it's just too long, and also the sear could be a little bit long. So they actually two in contact, but they are in tension. They actually pumping each other. And then when I use my finger to push it up, I actually feel the resistance. So you may not see it, but if you can also try on your gun. You can put your finger below and then try to push it to feel how much force is required to push the trigger bar back up on the sear. So the first thing is the trigger bar or the sear is too long, the width, especially the width. And also the contact angle between the sear and the trigger bar is not optimized for the trigger bar to move up. Okay, so the proposed modification is we are going to address the root cause, and then we can allow the trigger bar and the sear to have proper length and also proper angle in order to move up. Okay, so the first step we are going to do is that we have two choices. We can modify the trigger bar first and then fit the sear, or we can modify the sear and then fix the trigger bar. So that would be two choices. I would say that there would be no right and wrong, but because I'm not very skillful, so to work with very small part, so you can see the difference. So that would be the trigger bar, that would be the sear. So I just much more comfortable to work with something a little bigger, so I can have a hole on it, and also something is more rectangular instead of a sear that's quite small and also is kind of curved. So this would be I made my own decision based on my skill set and also confident. So that's why what I've done to my gun is I actually going to modify the trigger bar first, and then going to fit the sear to the trigger bar. I suggest you to actually going to make the corner over here. Assume this is how they interact. So the corner over here to be much more round. All right. And then for this modification, we have to reduce the length. Okay, so we have to reduce the length. Okay, at first we will have that much, and then we're going to reduce the length. Okay, so that what we have to do on the trigger bar. And also one more thing, we also have to make sure this area to be straight. So we have a curve, but in the meantime it will be straight. Hopefully my phone can pick it up, but if you look at the side profile over here, okay, some of them may not be so straight. It will be a little bit curved over here, so we want it to be straight. And why? Because when we want to, after we reduce the length, so you have less length over here, and then when we have a straight cliff over here, it will allow the trigger bar to move up as soon as possible. That will be what I have done to the trigger bar. And then I'm going to fit the sears to the trigger bar. If you pay attention, I will go back to the previous page. I actually draw the trigger bar with a corner over here. And this is actually what I observe on the stock trigger bar. Okay, so for this small angle over here, when the trigger bar move up, it actually going to be a bit longer, actually going to be pushing into the trigger bar. And because this angle over here, the trigger bar, this angle could also stuck at this angle area. Okay, so therefore, instead of that a little bit sharp angle, what I've done is I actually take a sandpaper, slowly going to smooth out that, but retain the shape, just like make it to be less angular. Okay, and then I also make it less angular, but in the meantime I'm going to file that and sand that to make it a little bit more straight. But you can see start over here if we have the trigger bar. If we go up, it will be a curve, and this area, if I only smooth it out, it would still stuck. Okay, because you imagine we have let me put something over here. Assume this this is the sear. This is the sear. So it's going to move up. Even if I smooth out this area, it will still stuck at this location. So therefore, how about if I going to make this location to be a little bit straight, but keeping the curvature on both on here and here. So assume this is a sear, and then going to move up to here. It actually experiences a vertical raise, so you have less friction because although they are still contacting each other, but they are not actually pushing to each other. And also on top, there will be nothing in preventing from moving up, and because it's a pretty straight surface, so it can go up. Okay, so that would be my modification. I cannot exactly tell you how many millimeters I remove. The reason is that after you have done other modification, for example, you sand out the trigger, the sear surface, and then you bend the trigger bar a little bit, and then you also sand off the rear trigger bar, then everyone will do things differently. There will be variance in different cases. So I cannot give you exactly how many millimeters, but I can tell you how many materials I actually remove every time slowly in order to achieve that good combination of both trigger bar and the sear. So I going to remove material roughly around 0.05 millimeters. All right. So sometimes even less, maybe 0.002. So for this modification, we are actually removing material, a little tiny bit of material, and then we're going to put them back together to test if it's going to work. If it is going to work, we're going to take it out and going to further sand it again. So it actually is a tedious process. It took me around 2 to 3 hours, but I'm not very skillful. But this is the logic and what I have done. So I just slowly go through to make this shorter. So first of all, it's pretty long. I slowly go through 0.05, make it shorter, up to a point that it can go up the sear. When I push it, I don't feel any resistance. So that is actually a good sign. Only the sear and the trigger bar get in contact. So up to this point, I know that I have already get the trigger bar done. Then I'm going to move to look at the sear. So for the sear, I'm going to make it less angular and also make it more straight. But I think I only remove like 0.03 to 0.05 millimeters of material. It's that tiny, very small. So that would be the idea. So let's look at the part that I modify. First of all, this is the trigger bar, the stock one. I haven't done anything to stock when I have some spare trigger bar. Okay, zoom in. All right. And that would be the rectangular area. Okay, so this is stock. I'm set aside. This is the one I modify. Okay, you can see. All right, so I actually make the round. I make it less angular on this area. And then I also want to show you how much material I remove on that rectangular area. Okay, so I'm going to try to put them together. the top is stock. The one at the bottom I modified. I measured with a caliper, so roughly around I remove it's actually 0.5 millimeters on the trigger bar. So actually way more, but it took me a lot of try to reduce to that length. Yeah, so I also suggest every time after you file and also you sand it, you also take a caliper to measure how much you remove. So I usually will measure it and take an increment approach. So 0.05 actually take a really very long time to sand it down to this length, and it will work with my sear. Okay, so once we have the trigger bar done, that we can have it return on the sear, then we are going to modify the sear. Okay, so this is the sear. I don't have any more stock sear. The one is in my gun right now, so but I can show you what I have done. Alright, so you can see that it will still retain that pointy shape, but it will be less aggressive. And I actually remove a very tiny amount of materials. Okay, so that will be from the side profile. I believe the most important part will be here. Alright, so see if I can show it clearly. Alright, so so actually the sear we sit like that. Okay, so assume the screwdriver is the trigger bar, so you're going to move along and then we'll move up. It's not that obvious, but around here, okay, let me move it. Okay, it's kind of hard to show, but I make this surface to be a little bit vertical. So I actually file a little bit rubber 0.05 and then finish off with some sandpaper to make this pointy part to be less aggressive. And also I introduce a vertical surface, just a very tiny vertical surface, allow it to move up. And that would be the major thing I've done. Alright, so I'm going to put the modified sear and the trigger bar back and then to show you what they do to the trigger reset distance and also the trigger pull. Okay, so I have replaced the trigger bar and also the sear back to the modified one. So let's see how it goes. So I still have the trigger screw protrude out. So hammer cock. Yeah, I can release the hammer, and then when I hold the trigger, yeah, it lock and also reset. Alright, so let's see if everything working inside the gun. So alright, and then going to pull the slide, release. Okay, so the trigger bar is under the sear, and then release the trigger. Oh, you can actually move back up. Another thing that we have to pay attention would be the trigger spring of GB-01. Because the trigger spring is going to affect how fast, how strong the trigger bar being bring up on the sear, and also how would be the resistance that you are going to feel when you pull in the trigger, and then during when you release the trigger, and then how strong the trigger being pulled forward to reset. So this trigger spring stiffness is going to control all of them. So we are going to modify the original trigger spring of GB-01. Okay, so after you have done all the modification on the trigger bar and also the sear, so the one already installed in there, and at least on my pistol, I feel that there may not be enough force to bring the trigger bar up fast, and also I don't feel enough force to bring the trigger forward to have a fast reset. So what I have done is I'm going to cut this. This was the original one. This is the one that I modified. I actually cut one ring, and then I'm going to take a small plier. So I use this two small plier just to bend out the second wing, and then put it back to test the stiffness. And then after all the testing, at least for my pistol, I find that I have to cut two ring, and then the center will have two ring, and the other will have another wing over here, in order to provide sufficient force or stiffness to return the trigger bar on the sear, and also give you a good return force on the trigger. And then as a result, my the reset on my GB-01 will be really good, really fast, and then I can do a really quick follow-up shot. Okay, so that pretty much the whole procedure on how to modify the trigger bar and the sear permanently in order to have a shorter trigger pull and also shorter resets. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and also contact us, and hope you have a good day.